Imagine being on your shift, looking after an apparently injured child, when suddenly she whispers something that changes everything. "He's going to hurt me again." What would you do? Claire Sullivan, a dedicated pediatric nurse, experiences this defining moment, where her courage and instinct are put to the test. In a race against time, she must act without arousing suspicion and save a life. But the danger is greater than it seems, and the truth behind what she discovers will leave you breathless. Subscribe to the channel, like it, and leave a comment. What would you do if you were in Claire's shoes? I was in the middle of yet another long shift in the pediatric emergency room. The night seemed endless. It's funny how, sometimes, even after years of experience, there are moments that make me feel like it's my first day. The emergency room is unpredictable. It can start with simple cases like children with colds or fevers, and within minutes, you find yourself dealing with something that makes you question everything you know. It was an ordinary Wednesday. The hospital was crowded, and I had already treated more than 10 children. Some of them were regulars, the ones who come in with worried mothers but leave after a simple treatment. Others, more serious, required more attention, like high fevers that wouldn't go down or a diagnosis of asthma. I enjoyed this part of my job, caring for them, seeing the improvement in their eyes. It gave me purpose. I already knew the rhythm of this type of shift. I knew that the calm never lasted long, but on that particular day, something felt off, even though I didn't know exactly what. I felt a pressure in my chest, a discomfort, as if I were waiting for something big to happen. My mind was racing, but my body kept to the routine. I checked charts, monitored vital signs, and made quick notes in the system. I've always been known among my colleagues for being focused, for not letting anything slip by, but that night I felt my hands moving slower, my actions automatic. Maybe it was fatigue or the fact that I had worked double shifts for the past 2 days due to staff shortages. Or perhaps it was just my intuition preparing me for what was to come. Sometimes I find myself reflecting on why I chose this profession. Being a nurse wasn't a childhood dream, one of those aspirations you carry from a young age. In fact, it was a choice that happened almost by accident after life pushed me in directions I hadn't expected. I grew up in a middle-class family with no great ambitions or challenges. My younger brother, Ethan, was always the talented one in the family. He played the piano like no one else and had an artistic sensitivity that set him apart. I was the practical one, the one who took the safest path. But when Ethan fell gravely ill, everything changed. I was 18 at the time, and it was the first time I felt completely powerless. The weeks we spent in the hospital, watching doctors and nurses care for him with almost heroic attention, awakened something in me. I decided I wanted to be like them, someone who could make a difference when someone's world was falling apart. That's how I started studying nursing, and years later, here I was in the pediatric emergency room, dealing with delicate situations every day. But even years of training and experience couldn't prepare me for the feeling of helplessness I was about to face. Each shift brought something new, but I took pride in always maintaining control, in never letting fear or doubt take over. Yet that night, there was a tension in the air that I couldn't ignore. It was as if something was waiting to happen, something significant enough to make me question my decisions and abilities. I remember being in the middle of a routine procedure when I noticed my watch already ticking close to midnight. The hospital had that heavy silence of the end of a shift when the halls become emptier, and the sounds of machines and monitors become more pronounced. The waiting area was a bit quieter, giving me a brief pause before the next call. While organizing some papers in the examination room, I heard the sound of quick footsteps echoing down the corridor. I didn't see immediately who it was, but I felt a change in the atmosphere, as if the entire hospital was holding its breath. My intuition screamed that something was about to happen. I looked up and, through the slightly open door, saw a figure standing at the reception with a child beside him. It was a tall man, his face marked by an expression far too serious for someone who had just brought a child to the emergency room. In that instant, a chill ran down my spine. That feeling that had been haunting me all night, that anxiety that made no sense until then, suddenly made sense. I knew, somehow, that the case of that child would not just be another file to fill, another prescription to write. It wasn't a cold or a fall. It was something much, much more serious. I took a deep breath and tried to remain calm. I couldn't show how unsettled I was. It was my job, after all, to maintain serenity in any situation, no matter how frightening it was. But there was something in that child's eyes, something that made me hesitate for a moment, a mix of fear and exhaustion that I couldn't ignore. I grabbed my stethoscope and walked over to the reception. The child looked fragile, even more so by the way the man was holding her. He seemed restless, impatient, as if he wanted to get this over with as quickly as possible. As I approached, he quickly explained that the girl had hurt herself in a fall at home. I simply nodded without questioning, but something in his tone deeply unsettled me. "I'm Claire, I'll take a look at her now," I said, trying to sound as natural as possible, while gesturing for him to bring her into the examination room. In that moment something shifted. I didn't know what it was yet, but the feeling that I was about to uncover something much bigger than I expected began to grow inside me. When I saw Emily for the first time, something inside me froze. She was so small, fragile. She couldn't have been more than 7 years old, but she looked even smaller, all curled up as if she wanted to disappear. Her eyes were the first thing that caught my attention, large, scared, fixed on the floor. It wasn't the gaze of a child who had simply fallen while playing. It was the gaze of someone carrying a weight that shouldn't belong to a child. The man beside her, who introduced himself as David, spoke quickly. He said she had fallen down the stairs at home, that it had been an accident, and he thought it best to bring her in to make sure nothing was wrong. His eyes told me another story, though he kept his voice steady and his movements controlled. There was something in the way he held her arm, gripping it as if he wanted to remind her of something without saying a word. In that moment I felt my stomach churn. "I just need to check a few things, okay?" I crouched down to Emily's level, hoping to make eye contact. "It will be quick, I promise." She didn't respond. Not a sound. Just a slight nod of her head, still avoiding my gaze. That made my heart ache. Children are, most of the time, very transparent. If they are scared, they cry. If they are in pain, they complain. But Emily wasn't like that. It was as if she were trapped within herself, with a fear so deep she couldn't break free. I took her to one of the examination rooms and asked David to wait outside. He hesitated for a second, his eyes scanning the room as if looking for an excuse to stay. But I maintained my firm stance. "I need a moment alone with her, it's part of the procedure." "Just a moment." He finally left, although I could feel the tension in his shoulders. Whatever was happening there was not simple. And now that I was alone with Emily, I could try to figure out what was really going on. When I closed the door, I turned to her with the softest voice I could muster. "Emily, I'm going to examine you now, okay?" I asked, trying to be as welcoming as possible. She merely nodded again without raising her head. Something was very wrong. I didn't know what it was, but my intuition told me there was more to it than just an accident. So while I checked her vital signs, I decided to take a bit of a risk. I couldn't pressure her. That would only cause her to shut down more. "This happened at home?" I asked casually while adjusting the blood pressure cuff on her arm. "Were you playing?" She bit her lower lip and shrugged, not giving me a clear answer. It was a small gesture, but enough to realize she didn't want or couldn't speak. I continued the exam in silence, trying not to show how much it was affecting me. Every mark on her body, small bruises on her arms, a cut on her lip that was almost healed, made me think of everything except an accidental fall. Finally, as I picked up my stethoscope to check her breathing, I heard a soft sound, almost imperceptible. At first I thought I had imagined it, but then I realized she had whispered something. "What did you say, sweetheart?" I asked, leaning in closer. She hesitated, glancing quickly at the door as if checking to see if anyone was listening. And then she spoke again in such a low tone that I could barely hear. "Help me." My hand froze in the air. In that moment, a chill ran down my spine. Whatever was happening with Emily was not just physical. It was something much larger, and she was trying to tell me this in the only way she knew how. Those two words, "help me," echoed in my head as I tried to process what it meant. I knew I needed to act carefully. David, or whoever that man was outside. I couldn't just run out and call the police without ensuring that Emily would be safe first. I took a deep breath and tried to remain calm because if I showed any sign of panic, it could make things worse. Emily, it's okay, I whispered back. I'm here. You're safe, okay? She didn't respond, but her eyes finally met mine. And what I saw there confirmed what I had already feared. That child was terrified. I needed to act, but with caution. I did my best to continue the exam normally, to avoid raising suspicion in case David was watching. I'm just going to take a quick look here and I'll be right back, okay? I said, trying to keep a casual tone as I stepped out of the room for a moment. I didn't know exactly what to do next, but I knew this situation needed more than I could offer at that moment. I went to the reception and discreetly asked one of my colleagues to call the police. I told her we had a risk situation and needed help immediately, but without causing a scene. I returned to the room, trying to maintain a calm demeanor. I couldn't let Emily see how serious I knew the situation was. I sat down beside her and, for a brief moment, touched her hand in a silent attempt to provide some comfort. The police are on their way, I thought to myself. Now I just need to buy some time. I knew I had started something I couldn't turn back from. As I examined the bruises on Emily's arms, the atmosphere felt increasingly heavy. It was as if the air around us had thickened, making it hard to breathe. I tried to focus on the examination to maintain my composure, but with each new mark I found on her small body, the knot in my stomach tightened further. Emily was so quiet. Most children would complain or at least ask questions about what I was doing, but she just lay there, motionless, with her eyes downcast and her lips pressed together. Each time I touched her skin, I felt that something inside her was screaming, but at the same time, a part of her seemed resigned, as if she already knew what was coming next. This mixture of fear and silence was devastating. It was then that I felt a slight tug on the sleeve of my lab coat. I looked down and saw that Emily was trying to get my attention, but without making any noise. She leaned toward me and for a moment I hesitated, unsure of what to expect. When her small lips began to move, I realized she wanted to tell me something. I leaned my face closer to hers, trying to understand, and that's when I heard it. He's going to hurt me again. Those words, so fragile, were almost inaudible, but their impact was immediate. My heart raced, and for a second, it felt like the ground had disappeared beneath my feet. My mind flooded with questions. He? Who is he? Is she talking about David? But before I could process everything, I felt panic rising within me. I needed to stay calm. I couldn't let her see my shock or fear. I tried to swallow the knot in my throat and lowered my voice so that no one but Emily could hear. Who is he, sweetheart? I asked, keeping my tone as gentle as possible. Are you talking about the man who brought you here? Emily didn't respond right away. Her eyes moved to the door, as if checking whether someone was on the other side, listening. She looked so scared, as if any louder sound could trigger something terrible. After a long silence, she slowly nodded, and the silent confirmation almost knocked me down. I knew I was now dealing with something much bigger than a simple medical emergency. This was not an accident, and I needed to be extremely careful. My top priority at that moment was to ensure Emily's safety, but without raising suspicions. If David, or whoever he was, sensed that we were suspicious, he might act unpredictably, and that was a risk I couldn't take. You did the right thing coming here, I whispered back, trying to keep my tone calm. I promise I will help you, okay? But you need to stay with me. Trust me, alright? She didn't say anything, but her large, fearful eyes met mine. I felt she wanted to believe me, but the trauma was visible. She had no trust in people, and that broke my heart. Even so, I squeezed her hand lightly in an attempt to convey a bit of security. I wanted her to know she was no longer alone, that I would do everything to protect her. I moved back a little, maintaining my composure to finish the examination. My hands were slightly trembling, but I continued, trying not to show how shaken I was. I checked the rest of her vital signs, looked over the bruises again, and made the necessary notes as if it were just another routine case. But inside I was already devising a plan. The police were on their way, and I needed to keep everything under control until they arrived. When I stepped out of the room for a brief moment to get more supplies, I spotted David across the hall, leaning against the wall with an impatient expression. He was looking at his phone, but the way he paced his feet on the floor, restless, did not go unnoticed by me. He knew something wasn't right. I could feel it. I entered the room again, and this time, my entire focus was on keeping Emily calm and safe until help arrived. I carefully closed the door and sat beside her once more. "They are coming, Emily," I thought to myself. "Everything will be all right." "Are you feeling any pain right now?" I asked, reverting to a professional tone. It was a way to maintain appearances in case David decided to walk in suddenly. She slowly shook her head but didn't say anything. However, her hand continued to tremble slightly, and I knew the fear was still there, present every second. And it was this fear that worried me more than any bruise or cut on her body. I had treated children in difficult situations before, but never someone who had told me something as terrifying and real as what Emily had whispered. Every second felt longer than the last, and I felt the weight of time dragging on. I knew I needed to act, but at the same time, I had to be meticulous. My mind raced 1,000 miles an hour, devising what to do if David decided to come back and ask what was going on. I had to maintain the facade that everything was fine while inside. I knew I was just minutes away from an explosion of events that would change everything. I looked back at Emily, trying to show that I was there for her. My voice, still low and calm, was the only thing I could offer at that moment to comfort her. "It's going to be all right, I promise." Inside, I prayed that this promise would be kept. As I tried to calm Emily, I kept my face impassive, but inside, panic was building up. I knew I couldn't let her perceive what I was feeling. Each second dragged on, and the silence that filled the room seemed heavier with each passing moment. It was as if the air was charged with tension, and I needed to act quickly. I stood up calmly, trying not to show the storm brewing inside me. I told Emily I would be right back, using a tone that sounded more optimistic than I truly felt. The last thing I wanted was to make her more anxious. As soon as I left the room, I carefully closed the door, creating a physical barrier between what might happen next and the fragility of that child. I walked quickly to the nurse's station, my heart racing. The fluorescent lights in the hallway were blinding, and the sound of my sneakers against the floor was deafening in the silence around me. My mind was racing, thinking of how to ensure Emily's safety. I needed the police, and I needed them now. When I reached the nurse's station, I went straight for the phone, my hands shaking slightly as I dialed Lucy's number, a friend who worked in the police department. She was an excellent professional and someone I trusted. I needed her. The phone rang, and I counted the seconds until I heard her familiar voice. "Lucy, it's me, Claire," I started, trying to keep my voice steady. "I need your help urgently." "What happened? Are you okay?" The concern in her voice was palpable. I could imagine her expression, brow furrowed and attentive gaze. "I'm at the pediatric ER and I have a child here." I paused, swallowing hard. "Her name is Emily. I think she's in danger. The man who brought her seems suspicious." Lucy immediately shifted into professional mode, her voice growing more serious. "What do you know about the man?" "He introduced himself as David, but I don't know if that's true. Emily told me he's going to hurt her again. She doesn't seem to have hurt herself just by accident, and I feel like there's something much more serious going on. The pressure in my chest increased with each word I spoke, the gravity of the situation beginning to surface. "I need you to send someone here. And fast. I'm sending a team now." "Stay calm and stay with the child," she replied, her voice firm yet empathetic. "Don't confront him if he comes back." "I know, but I'm scared, Lucy. What if he does something before help arrives?" My heart raced just imagining the possibility. "The team is on the way. Stay strong, Claire. You're doing the right thing." The call ended, but I stayed there for a moment, phone in hand, trying to process what I had just said. Adrenaline coursed through my veins, and the reality of the situation was becoming even more intense. This was not just a medical case, it was a life at risk. I took a deep breath, trying to find some way to calm myself. Time seemed to be working against me, and I knew I needed to get back to Emily. I lifted my gaze and saw my reflection in the glass of the nurse's station window. What I saw was not just a nurse. It was a woman about to get involved in something much deeper than she had ever experienced before. I was about to become an advocate, someone who needed to fight not just for that girl's health, but for her emotional and physical safety. I walked back to the room, my determination growing with each step. As I opened the door, I saw Emily sitting there, still quiet. The room felt too silent, and the weight of what was happening pressed against me like a wall. "Hi, I'm back," I said, trying to sound relaxed. "Is everything okay in here?" She looked at me and I saw a trace of relief on her face. She was waiting for something, perhaps a sign that everything would be all right. I moved closer to her, kneeling to be at eye level. "Remember I promised I would help you? I'm here with you. The police are on their way and they will take care of everything," I said, doing my best to convey confidence. Emily nodded but didn't say anything. The silence was heavy, as if she were holding something difficult to release. It was a silence that spoke more than any words. In that moment, my instinct told me she needed more than promises. She needed to feel she had control over something in her life, even if it was just a small gesture. "How about we do something fun while we wait? What if I show you how a stethoscope works?" I asked, trying to ease some of the tension. Her eyes sparkled a little, but there was hesitation. The fear was still there, even if she wanted to distract herself. But then she nodded, and that was what mattered. I pulled the stethoscope from my pocket and placed the device's earpieces in her ears. Emily's gaze lit up with a mix of curiosity and a hint of nervous giggle. "Now you can listen to your heart," I said, placing the instrument on her chest. "Let's see if it's beating as fast as mine." She looked at me with a shy smile, and in that brief moment, I felt a sense of relief amid the chaos. It was a fleeting glimpse of normalcy, a precious moment of connection that couldn't be wasted. "I can hear it," she said, looking at me with brighter eyes. "It's so fast." "That's right," I responded, seizing that moment to give her a sense of control and fun. "And you know it's because you're strong. The heart of a warrior beats fast." I had no idea how much longer we would have before help arrived, but I knew that while we were there together, I would do everything possible to make her feel safe, even if it was for just a few moments. The room was filled with possibilities and uncertainties, but for now I was determined to make that moment one of hope and not fear. I returned to Emily's room, trying to maintain a calm demeanor. What I found made my heart race. The man who brought her, David, was in the reception area, arms crossed and an impatient expression on his face. He seemed to be assessing the situation, his eyes wandering around the room as he waited. Each second felt like an eternity, and the air in the room was thick with tension. I needed to keep the girls safe without raising any suspicions. "Stay calm, Claire." "Stay calm," I thought as I tried to organize my thoughts. Emily was sitting on the bed, the stethoscope now around her neck, a small smile on her lips, but fear still lingered in her eyes. I knew that whatever was happening could unfold at any moment, and the pressure to act was mounting. "So, how are you feeling now?" I asked, trying to keep the conversation light and casual, even though adrenaline was pulsing through my veins. "A little better," Emily replied, her voice soft but tinged with anxiety. She looked at me with a mix of hope and fear, as if searching for a sign that everything would be all right. "That's great. What would you like to do now?" I pressed, while examining the medical paperwork on the table, trying to distract myself from the unease growing inside me. "Can we listen to music?" she asked, her voice low, almost as if she feared the answer. "Of course. I have a music app here on my phone," I said, pulling the device from my pocket. But as I scrolled through the screen, I couldn't help but glance at the clock. Each minute seemed to drag on, and with every tick, my heart sank a little more. What was going through David's mind? He didn't seem like the type of man who would wait patiently. With the phone in hand, I started playing a soft song, something that reminded me of home. It was comforting, and I hoped it would help relieve the tension. Emily began to nod her head to the rhythm, and it brought a smile to my face. At the same time, a part of me was nervous, worried about what David might do. He was a constant presence in my mind, a reminder that the situation was still volatile. As the music played, I looked for ways to distract her. I started inventing guessing games, asking about her favorite colors and whether she had any pets. In each of her answers, I saw a light shine, and it gave me hope. What I didn't realize was that while I was trying to maintain normalcy, time continued to slip through my fingers like fine sand. Why hasn't the police arrived yet? It was a question that wouldn't leave my mind. The feeling of urgency was rising. The room seemed to constrict around us, and the weight of the situation was almost palpable. With every laugh I could coax from Emily, I also felt a shadow of guilt, as if I were deceiving the girl about what was really happening. But at the same time my concern for David grew. He was there, seemingly calm, but impatience was evident in his posture. He stood up a few times, looking around as if he were waiting for something or someone. What was he thinking? I didn't know, but I could feel a chill in my stomach telling me that something was wrong. Every time he moved, I couldn't help but think about how I could protect her, but the truth was, I wasn't sure how to do that without raising suspicion. I didn't want David to sense the tension in the air, so I tried to keep the conversation flowing. But what I really wished for was the presence of the police. The idea that they might arrive at any moment was the only thing keeping me centered. So I forced a smile onto my face and said, "Do you like to paint, Emily? I loved drawing when I was little." She looked at me with curiosity. "Yes, I like it a lot. I once made a drawing of my house and there's a really big cat in front of it." "That's wonderful. And I think you're an amazing artist. When you're feeling better, we can have a painting session together. What do you think?" I proposed, knowing I needed a plan to distract her as much as I could. "Really? That would be cool," Emily said, now looking more excited. "I want to paint flowers and a smiling sun." "Great idea. And we can even make a rainbow," I replied, feeling a lightness in the air, even knowing that David was there, a threatening shadow in the reception. The music began to play louder, filling the room, and for a few moments, I was able to forget that the police still hadn't arrived. Time seemed to stop and I focused on Emily, her hopes and dreams. But in the back of my mind, a persistent echo whispered, "What if help doesn't arrive in time?" It was at that moment that I decided we needed to do something. I looked at Emily, who was distracted by the music and her own thoughts, and I knew I had to act to ensure her safety. Every moment was precious, and I couldn't allow anything to threaten her security. I walked to the door and peeked through the window. The hallway was empty and there was no sign of the police. What had happened? Why were they taking so long? I looked at Emily again and felt a chill in my stomach. She was counting her drawings, her eyes sparkling with the idea of a future that was still so promising in her mind. "You can do this, Claire," I thought. "You need to do this." It was a constant reminder that that girl's life was in my hands. I needed to be strong for her, but more than that, I needed to be cunning. If David was not who he claimed to be, I couldn't let him realize that he was about to be confronted. I returned to Emily's bedside and leaned close to her. "Hey, Emily. Are you feeling okay? You're not hungry, are you?" I asked, checking in on how she was doing. "I'm fine, just a little tired. But I'm excited to paint," she replied with a shy smile. Hearing that, I was overwhelmed by a wave of protectiveness. "Not while I'm here," I promised myself. Time was running out, but the little warrior in front of me inspired me to keep fighting. The weight was unbearable, but I wasn't alone in this battle. And as long as I stayed by her side, I would do everything to protect her until help arrived. Minutes later, the door opened quietly, and I felt an immediate relief when I saw Lucy enter. Disguised as a patient, with a hat pulled down over her eyes and a loose jacket, she seemed determined not to raise any suspicions. I took a deep breath, a mix of anxiety and hope, as I watched her walk straight past the reception area, ignoring David, who was still impatiently checking the watch on his wrist. When Lucy reached me, the tension in the air was palpable. She quickly glanced at Emily, who was distracted with the drawings I had promised to make with her, and then turned to me with a firm look, her eyes conveying a clear message. Something was very wrong. "Claire," Lucy whispered, leaning in closer, "we need to talk." "Not here. Let's go to the break room." I nodded, my heart racing. I tried not to let my unease show on my face, but inside I was on high alert. Lucy had always been my friend, but she was also a sharp police officer who knew how to handle delicate situations. If she was here, it meant something serious was happening. We walked to the break room, and with each step, my stomach tightened. The door closed behind us, and I turned to Lucy, who quickly shed her patient appearance, pulling off the hat and letting her brown hair fall over her shoulders. "What's going on, Lucy?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "The man who brought Emily," she began, her expression serious and concerned. "He's wanted. Involved in child trafficking. We have several reports against him, but we haven't been able to catch him yet. My heart raced. The revelation was a direct stab. I had felt that something was wrong, but hearing Lucy's words made everything much more real and frightening. But how is this possible? He seemed so normal, so worried about her. My voice faltered, doubts swirling like a storm in my mind. Normal is a complicated word, Claire. He may seem harmless, but people like him are masters of manipulation. What matters now is that you and Emily are in danger, Lucy said, her tone unwavering. A chill ran down my spine. The truth settled inside me, and the idea that I had left Emily vulnerable was unbearable. A wave of guilt hit me, but Lucy quickly interrupted my cycle of thoughts. Listen, you did the right thing by calling me. We can't act recklessly. We need to wait for backup, and in the meantime keep Emily safe, Lucy said, determination evident in her voice. And what do I do? What do I say to her? I can't let her realize what's going on. She's so young, so innocent. I don't want her to be scared, I replied, my anguish growing. Lucy looked at me, her eyes softening a bit. You're her nurse. Keep being that. Do what you were already doing. Distract her, keep her occupied. As soon as we have a plan, I'll let you know. I felt relieved to hear that, but the weight of responsibility felt even heavier. How could I ensure the safety of such a small girl when the man who brought her was a predator? You'll need to be careful. He can't suspect that something is happening. Remember, appearances can be deceiving, she warned, her expression becoming more serious. I know. I don't want him to realize that I'm suspicious. I'll keep doing what I've been doing, I affirmed, feeling a wave of determination rise within me. I wouldn't let Emily be alone in this nightmare. Not now. Lucy stepped toward the door, but before she could leave, I grabbed her arm. Wait, Lucy. What if he tries something? What if the police take too long? My voice was laden with concern. We'll be there as soon as we can. Stay calm, Claire. You have the strength to protect Emily. Remember, right now, you're the only one who can help her, Lucy said, her encouraging tone giving me a bit of confidence. With one last look, Lucy left the room, leaving me alone with the weight of the information. I knew I needed to return to Emily, but now the idea of being near David was frightening. How could I stay calm when everything inside me wanted to scream? I took a deep breath and tried to remember Lucy's words. You are strong. Then I returned to the room and Emily's smile awaited me, innocent and hopeful. That was what I needed to protect. Hi, Emily. What were you doing? I asked, trying to keep my voice cheerful. I'm drawing a sun. Look how it shines, she said, holding up the drawing with both hands, a sparkle in her eyes. It's beautiful. You're a true artist, I replied, trying to absorb the joy she radiated. Hearing her excitement, I let the shadows of worry drift away a little, even if just temporarily. But as we talked, a part of me remained alert, my eyes always vigilant toward the door. Whatever happened next, I couldn't let David or any other force tarnish that girl's innocence. The battle was only just beginning. I had to be the warrior Emily needed. The tension in the room was almost unbearable, and the joy we were trying to build quickly began to dissipate. Emily was distracted with her drawing, but I couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. Then, the door swung open abruptly, and before I could process it, David entered, his fierce gaze landing on me and the little girl. That was when fear overtook Emily. Her eyes, once bright, were now wide, filled with terror. I couldn't think clearly. The only thing I knew was that I couldn't leave her in the presence of that man. The instinct to protect took over, and in a swift movement, I scooped Emily into my arms. Emily, let's go, I shouted, my voice echoing down the hallway. She clung to my neck tightly, her hurried breaths mingling with mine as I ran. Adrenaline propelled me forward, while the hospital corridors seemed to stretch infinitely ahead. I glanced back only once and saw David standing still for a moment before starting to follow us. Panic settled over me like a shadow. He can't catch us. I won't let that happen, I thought as I ran, the pounding of my heart resonating in my ears. The hallway felt like a maze, but I knew the hospital like the back of my hand. I needed to find an exit. Lucy, with her determination as a police officer, quickly joined us, shouting orders to security along the way. Her words were like a touch of hope, but they also heightened the urgency of the situation. "Claire, we need to get to the exit," she yelled, already running alongside us. Seeing her gave me a little courage, but the feeling that David was getting closer made me push myself even harder. Emily, in my arms, trembled, and I could feel her small, fragile body against me. Her soft voice cut through the air, almost inaudible, but I heard her. "Aunt Claire, I'm scared." Her words hit me like a dagger. I needed to be strong for both of us. The fear she was feeling couldn't be in vain. Looking into her eyes, I tried to convey a calmness I didn't feel. "I'm here, sweetie. We'll be safe. Do you trust me?" I asked, my voice soft yet firm. She nodded, though still looking frightened. Her determination gave me a new burst of energy. I kept running, Lucy's footsteps behind us, providing cover and shouting instructions. The reception was just a few steps away, and the blinding light of the floodlights directed me like a beacon. Hope was growing in my chest, but the thought of David closing in was a ghost that wouldn't leave me in peace. "Hurry, Claire," Lucy shouted again, and I saw her pull out her radio, calling for backup. The sound of the conversation was muddled in the chaos, but I knew the police were on their way. We needed to keep David away from us until they arrived. We reached the hospital entrance, and the automatic doors opened, revealing the fresh night air. I just needed a few more steps, a few more seconds. The outside world seemed like a refuge, but the feeling of being pursued was suffocating. That's when I heard the sound of rapid footsteps behind us. I didn't look back, but I knew David was coming. A primal instinct surged within me, and I accelerated, my body moving in a frenzy fueled by protection and desperation. "Claire!" Lucy shouted, and in a swift motion she positioned herself between us and David, her hands firm and determined. "You won't hurt them," she yelled with an authoritative voice that almost shook the air. David hesitated, but only for a second. He looked furious, and a chill ran down my spine, warning me that he wasn't going to give up easily. "You don't know who you're dealing with, officer," David snarled, his eyes scanning the situation, searching for a way to escape. In an instant, adrenaline surged and the tension intensified. I needed a plan. If Lucy couldn't hold him, David might do something desperate. What to do? I only had one chance. "Emily, hold on tight, okay?" I said as I quickly placed her in a safe corner behind Lucy. "Stay here and don't move." The little girl nodded, her wide eyes still scared but trusting me. That gave me strength. With a shout, I decided I wouldn't stand still. I moved forward, approaching David. "You won't hurt her," I said, my voice steady, and even though I was trembling inside, my defiant stance didn't reveal the fear I felt. He glared at me, rage and confusion mixing on his face. This tiny fraction of uncertainty could be all we needed. "Go back to where you came from, and I'll let you leave in peace," I continued, trying to use logic. David was acting impulsively. He didn't want to create a scene. But reality was beginning to take shape, and I knew he wasn't just trying to intimidate us. He was a predator and we were the prey. So, as Lucy prepared to act, a new surge of hope filled me. That's when I saw the blue light flashing in the distance, the police siren approaching. The sense of relief began to spread, but there was still much to do. We needed to keep David under control until they arrived. "He can't get away," I shouted to Lucy. "We can't let him escape." And so, with adrenaline coursing through us and the police drawing near, time seemed to freeze. We knew the battle was far from over, but one thing was certain: we wouldn't give up. Emily, with her innocence and courage, deserved a happy ending, and I was willing to fight for it no matter the cost. The corridor was dark and deserted, as if the hospital itself was trying to shield us from the reality we were about to face. The sound of David's footsteps, or rather Mark Benson, approached, and each beat of my heart echoed like a warning. Emily was pressed against me, her irregular breathing reminding me that I couldn't fail. "We need to find a safe place," I murmured to Lucy, who was beside me, her firm expressions revealing the determination that burned within her. But before we could make a move, Mark's shadow appeared at the end of the corridor, blocking our exit. I knew I was facing the leader of a trafficking network, but at that moment he was just a man with dark intentions and a threatening gaze. His eyes were fixed on us, and his crooked smile confirmed that he felt in control. "Look who we have here," he said, his voice smooth yet filled with a veiled threat. A nurse and a police officer, two heroines with brave hearts. But what do you think you can do against me? I felt adrenaline coursing through my body. The instinct to protect that I had cultivated during all those years of work was not just a reaction. It was a part of me. Emily was trembling and I needed to be strong even though I was falling apart inside. You won't hurt that girl, I said, my voice laden with a confidence that I wasn't entirely sure of. It was more an act of bravery than a real certainty. I needed to keep my front strong not just for Mark but also for Emily, who was looking at me with those big eyes, searching for an answer. Oh, but I already have and I can do it again. You have no idea who I am, nurse, he replied, taking a step forward. This game is over. Lucy slowly moved to place herself between Mark and us, but he didn't seem intimidated. In fact, he appeared to be enjoying himself, like a cat playing with a mouse before delivering the final blow. What did he want from us? Mark, you're surrounded, Lucy shouted, trying to maintain authority in her voice. The police are on their way and you're not escaping this time. Oh, you think you can threaten me? He scoffed with a dry laugh. I am more than a simple prey. I have connections, power. I'm not just any criminal. I exchanged a quick glance with Lucy, searching for a strategy and escape, anything that could help us out of this situation. Despair was turning into a buzz inside me. Mark was there, right in front of us, and he had the upper hand. Emily, I murmured softly, trying to distract her from the panic that was consuming her. Look at me, sweetie. We're in this together, right? She nodded slowly, and the confidence I was trying to convey to her gave me a little more courage. What I really needed was a plan. Mark, why don't you step back and leave that girl alone? I tried again, attempting to make him think he had control while searching for a way out. She has nothing to do with this. Mark looked at me, a sneer crossing his face. Do you really think you can buy me off? He waved his hand dismissively as if brushing away a fly. That girl belongs to me. You don't understand that her life is worth nothing without what I can offer. Rage burned inside me, but I needed to stay grounded. I had to think clearly. If he had any weakness, something we could use to our advantage, that was what we needed to discover. And what exactly do you offer, Mark? I asked, challenging him even as a sense of insecurity grew. He smiled again, but this time there was something more, something dark. I offer freedom, he replied, his voice now a malignant whisper. Freedom from pain, from suffering. I can give what you cannot. Emily, still in my arms, made an involuntary movement, as if she wanted to shrink closer to me. I could feel her fear intensifying, and that ignited a flame within me. I couldn't allow her to be taken, for Mark to gain any advantage. You might think you have control, but you don't know what it means to face someone determined to protect what they love. You won't get anything from that girl, I said, and in that moment I knew I had to act. With a quick movement I signaled to Lucy. We needed to divert his attention. I stepped closer to Mark, and just as he was about to respond, I seized the distraction to pull Emily to the side and quickly signaled for Lucy to prepare. You won't take her, I shouted, pushing Emily behind me. My heart was racing, and for a moment, everything seemed to slow down. Mark hesitated, and that gave me the opening I needed. I didn't know how long I could hold him off, but what guided me was the protection of Emily. Lucy and I exchanged a glance that said it all. We needed courage and strategy. He was right there in front of us, and we were the only barriers between him and what he wanted. So, with determination burning inside me, I took a deep breath and prepared for the confrontation. There would be no retreat. Not today. The sound of sirens echoed through the hallways, and a momentary relief washed over my body. It was as if an invisible weight began to dissipate, but the situation was still critical. Mark was there, increasingly restless, his expression transforming into a mask of anger and despair. The look he cast at me was loaded with implicit threats, but there was no way to back down. You can't do this, he shouted, nervously pacing back and forth. His gaze shifted past me toward the door, as if searching for an exit, an opportunity to escape this situation. Stay away from her. My voice came out as a shout, but it wasn't just a scream of panic, it was a shout of determination. Emily was hiding behind me and I wouldn't allow anything to reach her. Then, as if the universe was responding to my silent plea, the police burst into the corridor. Lucy led the group, and her presence was like a beacon of hope amid the darkness. I could feel the tension in the air was about to dissipate. "Mark Benson," shouted one of the officers, a tall man with a firm voice. "You are surrounded. Surrender immediately." Mark hesitated, looking at the police with an expression that mixed frustration and fury. I could see the struggle within him. He knew he had connections, but at that moment, everything seemed to be falling apart around him. "You don't know who you're dealing with," he yelled, but the bravado in his voice sounded increasingly empty. The officers advanced, and he began to realize he had nowhere to run. "You better give up, Mark. We don't have time for games," Lucy said, stepping a few paces forward. Her tone was authoritative, but there was a touch of compassion in her voice. She knew what was at stake. And, as if the room itself was holding its breath, Mark turned, trying to escape. But before he could take 2 steps, 2 officers grabbed him by the arms, immobilizing him. I saw frustration and defeat in his eyes as they handcuffed him. The weight of fear I had been carrying began to lift. Emily, who had been behind me, finally moved, taking a step forward. Her eyes, once filled with terror, now shone with a mix of relief and disbelief. I crouched down to her level, and when our eyes met, I felt a wave of connection. "You're safe now, Emily," I said softly, trying to instill confidence in her. "It's going to be okay." She nodded slowly, tears beginning to stream down her cheeks. The relief was clear on her face, and I knew she finally understood that the storm was coming to an end. The police led Mark out of the room, and I followed his progress with my eyes, watching as they took him to the reception area. It was a surreal moment, as if reality was unfolding before me. I knew the fight wasn't over, there was still much to be done, but this was an important step. Lucy approached me, her gaze searching mine. There was a silent understanding between us. We had both faced something terrifying, but we had managed to overcome it. "You were amazing, Claire," she said, and there was a gleam of admiration in her eyes. "You acted with courage and compassion." "I just wanted to protect her," I replied, feeling the emotion wash over me again. The weight of the events was beginning to settle on my shoulders, and the reality of what we had just faced started to hit me. The door closed behind Mark, and a sense of victory began to fill the empty space that had once been occupied by fear. I looked at Emily, who was now in the arms of a social worker who had arrived to help her. Her gaze was still filled with questions, but there was also a spark of hope. "I'm here and you're safe now," said the social worker gently as she embraced Emily. The gentle touch seemed to lift some of the pain the girl had been carrying. I watched as the officers talked among themselves, one of them jotting down information about the situation. Part of me wanted to leave, to put all of this behind me, but another part knew that this moment was crucial. I needed to ensure that Emily had the support she needed. "I'll stay with her until everything is resolved," Lucy said, approaching me again. "We need to make sure she's protected and safe." "Thank you, Lucy," I murmured with immense gratitude. Having a friend like her by my side made all the difference. As the tension eased and life slowly returned to normal, I looked at Emily one last time, and our gazes met again. In that instant, all I wanted was for her to know she wasn't alone. There was a long road ahead, but the light was finally beginning to shine through the darkness. And so, as I observed the conclusion of that tumultuous day, a new determination began to grow within me. I might not have all the answers, but I knew that the fight for Emily's protection and hope had only just begun. After that day, something changed within me. The adrenaline was still coursing through my veins, but as the world outside continued, I found myself immersed in deep reflection. The experience I had lived through was not just a call to courage, it was a turning point. I knew that my work with children was my calling, but now it felt bigger, more urgent. As I looked at the hospital walls, which had previously been nothing more than cold, white surfaces, I began to imagine something new. A clinic. The clinic I had long dreamed of opening was no longer just a distant dream. It was a necessity, a visceral desire. I wanted to create a place where children like Emily could heal, where they could feel safe, where whispers of fear would transform into laughter and stories of triumph. I went home that night with a restless mind filled with plans and possibilities. What had once been a sketch of a project was now becoming a mission. I could visualize every corner of the clinic. A colorful waiting room, walls decorated with children's drawings, toys that would provide comfort and joy. But more importantly, I wanted it to be a space where they could feel welcomed and protected, a shelter amid chaos. I remembered Emily, her eyes filled with fear, and in contrast, the hope that began to shine when the police arrived. If I could help one child find that kind of hope, then it would all be worth it. I wanted the clinic to be a beacon, not just for those needing medical care, but for any child who had faced difficult situations. In the following days, I dove headfirst into research and planning. I began sketching out a project, gathering information on how to open a pediatric clinic and what would be necessary. The process felt monumental, but the idea of giving these children a safe space filled me with determination. Every time I sat at the table to work, I felt a new energy rising within me. It was as if every page turned brought forth a new possibility, a new way to transform fear into hope. I talked to Lucy about my project. She was excited and offered her support. Together, we discussed the possibility of creating partnerships with organizations fighting against child trafficking, providing resources and support to at-risk families. The desire to turn pain into action united us in a greater purpose, and that gave me courage. In a moment of introspection, I remembered Emily's words, that whisper still echoing in my mind. "He's going to hurt me again." I was haunted by the thought that many children carry fears that go beyond the physical. They need more than medical care. They need protection, love, a place where they can rebuild themselves. I wanted my clinic to be a space where those voices were heard, where every child had a chance to share their story, to feel seen and heard. With each step I took toward realizing this dream, I felt more secure. The idea of opening the clinic was not just a professional ambition. It was a commitment to all the children who, like Emily, faced silent battles. I was determined to use my experience and knowledge to create a real impact. As the months passed, my vision began to take shape. I sought investors, created business plans, and, with the help of Lucy and others who believed in my dream, the first steps began to be taken. Each small advance felt like a sign that I was on the right path. And when I sat in front of my computer, writing down each new idea, I felt an indescribable emotion growing inside me. Finally, the day of the grand opening arrived. The clinic was ready, and I could hardly believe what I had accomplished. As I opened the doors, a feeling of fulfillment washed over me. Children were running through the hallways, laughter filling the air, while parents chatted, feeling the tranquility of the environment. I remembered Emily, the promise I made to myself and to her. The clinic was not just a physical place. It was a symbol of hope, healing, and a better future. I knew there was still a long way to go, but I was ready to face any challenge that came my way. And so, as I watched children playing and recovering, a smile spread across my face. The journey had just begun, and as I looked to the future, I felt that I was finally fulfilling my purpose. I was not just a nurse. I was an advocate, a protector, and I was determined to make a difference in the life of every child who walked through the door of my clinic.